Mac Power Users, episode 651, 3,041 press releases. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mac Power Users. I'm David Sparks, and joined by my co-host, Mr. Stephen Hackett. Hey, Stephen.
Hello.
I am excited. It is time for a Mac Power Users feedback episode, and we've got so much feedback today. I'm looking forward to this one.
This document is busting at the seams.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. Things going on, betas to talk about, new apps, new software, bunch of questions from listeners. This is going to be a fun one. These are always, and I always say this every time, but these are always some of my favorite shows to record because so many of our shows are focused. Like last week, we did a whole episode on craft. It is kind of fun to run rampant and roughshod over the Mac ecosystem once in a while. So, we like that. We like to mix it up once in a while.
That's right.
Before we get started, housekeeping. We've just got a few days left to get your calendar.
Yeah. It's going to end in just a few days. It wraps up on August the 5th at about, I think it's 10 a.m. Eastern. That's a Friday, so it's the Friday after this episode comes out. So yeah, it's right at the tail end of it. So we're going to talk some about my workflows. You would ask me about some of this, and we're like, hey, let's talk about it on the show. So we're going to dive into how I put this together. But just a few days left to back it, so go check it out.
Yeah, I mean, you put your journalist hat on for this, and I really want to kind of dig into that today. The Shortcuts for Mac Field Guide webinar series, we've now recorded 4 of the 5, and they're getting uploaded to the course for the people who bought the Plus edition. Thank you, everybody who did that. It's now, I don't have the exact time. I think it's just a little over 5 hours of additional content at this point, in addition to the 8.5. So it's really fun. I like this model because I'll be able to do more webinars on it as things evolve with Shortcuts for Mac over the next year. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And thanks, everyone, for participating in that. And I've learned a ton about webinars in the last month, I'll tell you that. Today on More Power Users, I want to give an update on indoor studios. My studio build at my house, there's like stuff going on, and I have things I need to work out with you.
Yeah, you keep sending me photos of your backyard being slowly destroyed.
Yeah, it's great. Well, destruction before construction, right?
That's right. Yeah, you got to tear it down so you can rebuild it,
Yes. But I want to talk today about this Kickstarter because, there's a couple things going on here. So you made a calendar, but on the calendar, you put a bunch of dates that are going to get sent out to thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I eventually want to get to the mechanics of making a calendar. But before I do that, just like, how did you do the research to figure out that your dates were right? And, what were your sources? And just kind of walk us through that part of the project.
Yeah, this is really in some ways, the hardest part of it. And it's where I'm this year kind of reaping the benefits of the work I did last year. So last year was the first one. It focused on hardware dates. Like, when did this machine come out? When was this accessory put on sale? That sort of thing. When did this machine get recalled for catching on fire? Those sorts of things. And there is actually one PowerBook that had that problem back in the day. It's bad news.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I don't love it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's terrible, but also hilarious. Look, it's 90s Apple. We can all make fun of 90s Apple.
I read once, I don't know, tell me if this is true. I read once that in the 90s, they had a Mac where they put a speaker in the Mac, but they put the magnet in the speaker so close to the hard drive that it would randomly erase data from the hard drive. Is that true?
That's probably true. I've heard that too.
If you turned up the volume enough, the magnet would engage and start wiping your drive.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Well, the Apple Watch has the loud noise notification. It's really just the same thing if you think about it.
Yeah.
So last year when I set out, I had already been using DevonThink for a while. We've talked about this on the show before, but I have a massive collection of documents in DevonThink about computer history. So I have, every edition of Mac User magazine, almost all of Macworld magazine. I'm missing a few years of Macworld, but tons of web archives. And that web archives, in particular of Apple's press releases, are sort of the first place I look for things. the problem is Apple's press releases on their current website only go back to the year 2000 or 2001. You can't get stuff from the 90s, let alone the 80s. But a lot of that is on the Internet Archive. And so last year when I was doing this, I went through, and it just took like days and days and days of work combing through the Internet Archive of these archive versions of really old versions of Apple's website, finding old press releases from the 90s and importing them into DevonThink as web archive files. And so now I'm opening DevonThink now, but in my like Apple press release folder, there are just thousands and thousands of these documents, 3,041 Apple press releases that I've saved over the years. And I can search for anything that I want to search for. So say that I'm, looking for something about the eMac G4, right? I can search Apple's press releases, but I can also search across all of these magazines, all of these other articles I've come across over the years. And DevonThink lets me see into all of those and search, because one thing I do is I have DevonThink OCR any PDFs that come in. So I have OCR copies of, 146 Mac user magazines and 125 Mac Addict magazines. The tricky bit is, of course, knowing what you don't know. And so I will go through, I did it this year as well, and make a list of things that I want to make sure I hit. And so I use things like Mac Tracker, which is this great free Mac app and iOS app that lets you look through like the historic products Apple has made and software and hardware and all sorts of stuff. And then going through and finding the relevant dates either in DevonThink or out on the web. And so one thing that I do to make sure these dates are correct is that I have to have two, ideally three, independent sources pointing to the same date. And that's where some of it gets hard when you go back, especially to the 80s, where not really like a lot of daily coverage of the stuff, right?
Yeah.
I found, like, for instance, I have a bunch of like Apple II user group magazines I stumbled across years ago and put into DevonThink. Those are released monthly or like every 6 or 8 weeks, and they only may get me whittled down to a certain month. And it just takes a lot of Googling and a lot of research in my own materials to find that.
Yeah. So like one source is a press release, but another source needs to be like a Macworld article or something like that.
Right.
Wow. That gets tedious, I bet.
It does get tedious, and I don't take Wikipedia at face value. I always go to the sources, listed at the bottom of the article. I don't take whatever's like in the sidebar for a certain software or product or anything at face value. I want to go find the actual sources.
And, the thing is, like we've talked about, these calendars go up, in Cupertino at Apple headquarters. So, like, you don't want to get it wrong because there's people in the building that worked on some of this stuff. They're going to know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A fun example of this is I think we've mentioned it on the show before, so forgive me, but I wrote this piece back in May about finding one of these dates. In fact, this date is in the calendar, and I found an ad in a magazine about when John Scully was speaking, where at the place where this certain software release was announced. And so, like, okay, that's a secondary source that works. So you got to go deep. But yeah, I don't want to get anything wrong. And thankfully, I've not heard. I know I'm inviting it on myself now. I haven't heard from anybody that anything is wrong in the first calendar, and I hope that's the case this time as well. But part of the process is I have somebody do independent fact checking. So our friend Kathy Campbell, I send her a list of all the dates that are in the calendar. And so we work actually out of a shared Apple Note. So it's a really long Apple Note that has a breakdown for each month. And then as I'm putting this together, I put every possible date I may use. And then I highlight the ones that actually made it into the calendar. Because sometimes it's like, okay, there's 4 things announced on a single date. I don't have physical room for 4 things. I kind of pick the 2
Yeah.
strike me as the weirdest or, the most unusual or the funniest. Sometimes it's about humor. Like there's one date in the calendar. I forget what versions of iTunes it was, but it's like iTunes 4, iTunes 5 or something was on the market like 3 weeks. And then they had another major release. And so like that's in there.
Yeah.
But I send her all of those dates and I send her links to my sources. And so she will go through and make sure that I actually have them on the right date and like what the language that I'm using like makes sense to her because she's not an Apple historian, right? She's actually a really good sounding board for this because it's not her bread and butter. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
well, you say that it was announced this date, but this press release actually says it was released. Like, is there a difference there? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And so we go back and forth and clarify and clean up things a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of work and, but it pays off. And it is interesting that, Devon Think is kind of the central tool for that, but then you make the list of dates in Apple Notes.
Yeah. It's really just so we can share them together easily.
And then once you make your final decisions, is that in Apple Notes or there's the data go somewhere else?
So the Apple Note is sort of the record of all possible dates and dates that go in the calendar, just so they're in a format where I don't have to send her like a giant PDF. And also it's just easily scannable where I can just look through and say I could search like, okay, do I have 2 dates about a certain thing? Or, do I want to maybe downplay like iLife and put something else in there? So I can search and kind of easily see what's going on with those things. But the Apple Note is kind of the record of what's actually in the big InDesign document.
And then for the calendar itself, actually before we get the calendar, you always do photography, but this year it was software. So was it just screenshots or how did you do the photography this year?
Yeah, so the photography for at least, and I'm not done shooting the photos, like still working on it, but
Okay.
a lot of the photos are devices running with software. So like for instance, there's a photo of an eMate, which like this was this weird like Newton OS little clamshell laptop they made for a minute. And that is running Newton OS, and like on the screen is like a document I typed up about the eMate. And so I've got to take the photo where that works. And a lot of these are actually multiple photos sort of merged. So like the screen looks good and everything. But
Yeah.
there's also some photos that are just hardware. And then I sort of, in the caption and in the dates, they're more focused on software. But yeah, there's no screenshots in it in terms of just like you open a page and it's just like a screenshot of iTunes, right? It's always going to be in the context of hardware.
Yeah. And how are you merging that? Like when you put a screenshot into a photo?
Yeah, well, so far it's been basically just multiple exposures of the same image. And so like the eMate, I wanted the screen really like crisp and easy to see. So I shot photos where the photo was exposed for the screen. And then I shot photos in the same setting, the same place, exposed for the eMate itself, and sort of in Photoshop kind of merged those things.
Yeah, yeah. So HDR kind of stuff.
Basically it's like HDR how I learned in college, like kind of mainly doing it in Photoshop.
Yeah, cool. And then you put all of that into the calendar, which where do you lay out the calendar?
Yeah, so it's in InDesign. And again, this year I'm able to build on what I made last year. Like last year I opened InDesign, I was like, how do you make a calendar? And so actually, like we have a wall calendar hanging in our kitchen, which is kind of where this idea came from. And I took it off the wall and I brought it to my office. I was like, how does this work? Right. And ultimately a calendar is just a table, right? But I had to kind of figure out like, how do I space it? Not all months have the same number of weeks, so I have to accommodate for that. But I was able to use kind of the bones of what I built last year to build this year's, which saved me a lot of time and honestly a lot of headache because that was a lot of work kind of figuring it out for the first time. But it's all in InDesign, and in InDesign you can set, just like you can in iWork, you can set text styles, and so I have text styles for everything. So like the name of the month is like a style, so I can highlight text and make it all look the same. the dates all look the same because these textiles all match. And so that's a really nice way to make sure that everything's consistent throughout all of the pages, and to make sure that, oh, this one, like, I accidentally missed and left it bold. Like, it's all very consistent because of those tools within InDesign, which is pretty cool.
Can I just stop for a minute and say everybody that's not using textiles should use textiles?
Yes.
I mean, it is so much easier. Like, even like I use it in Keynote. People don't realize Keynote has textiles in it. And so if you decide this font is a little too small, or you want to make it, a serif versus a sans serif or whatever, you just adjust the style and every slide gets fixed immediately. It's like our Pages, of course, and Microsoft Word or the Adobe Suite. Anytime you can use those things, you should. And the other nice benefit you get in word processors is it often will make an auto-generated table of contents. I mean, there's just not a good reason not to use them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't,
I mean, we even use them in our Google Docs. Like, sometimes when we have guests on the show, I mean, how often do we get the comment like, this is the nicest looking Google document I've ever seen? It's because we use styles to make everything nice and consistent.
Yeah, and because we use styles, we can also get a summary outline on the left side of our screen when we're recording, and it allows us to jump around. And like, I don't know. I used to get in that fight at the firm when I was working at a law firm. My support staff would always resist me. They're like, "Oh, just make it bold. It's fine." I'm like, "No, that's not fine. If you're doing it for me, it's got textiles." And
Mm-hmm.
I never understood why people. And I guess there's a bit of resistance because it's something to learn or something. I'm not really sure what the problem is. And then, or maybe because when people change them, they don't understand the concept of just changing the style. But it just takes very little training to understand how that works and really make a difference. Sorry, I had a little soapbox I had to get on.
No, it's one I believe in. Believe me.
And then you've got a publisher that now is the deliverable a PDF, or what's the file that goes out?
Yeah, so I send the printer, which is a local company to me here in Memphis, which I really like. I can, like, last year we went through a lot of paper samples. We can do it all in person, which is fantastic. Saves a lot of time, saves a lot of headache. And I can, so I deliver them a high quality PDF out of InDesign, complete with like crop marks. So like the photos, if you have one from last year, the photos are printed all the way to the edge of the paper. Well, it's actually an overprint, and then it's cut down to size. And so all of those lines and all those marks, I'm forgetting the official word for this, which is embarrassing, but that's all built into the PDF. So I send them the PDF, and then we'll do, a couple of test prints. Like last year, we actually changed the paper at the very last minute, like basically a week before publication, we changed the paper. And so like last minute, I was out there like, yes, this looks good. This year, the paper is already decided, so hopefully no last minute excursions out there because they're out in the suburbs. But it is cool to have that done locally, and that means that when they're all printed, they show up in a truck or in a van with a big pallet of calendars and drop them off in my driveway. And the stickers, I get printed online. The stickers are designed by our friend Daniel. He makes the app GIF Wrapped, which is like a GIF management application for your phone, which is fantastic. And then those just get shipped to me, and I put it all together here in the studio.
So going from the first year to the second year, what was the biggest lesson you learned?
The biggest lesson is that I don't think many people cared about the 4x6 prints that were included last year. So I've taken those out this year for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, I don't think some people really cared. And so there is going to be an option for backers to order them separately after the fact. But I think most people didn't care about them. They were very labor intensive to pack because there were, I guess, 14 4x6 photos. We had them all sorted, and then we had to go around and like pack them into sets. And I also pulled them out to keep the cost down because the expense of printing the calendar went up significantly this year, just like everything else has. But using or getting rid of the prints let me keep the cost down from last year. In fact, the highest tier is actually a little bit less than it was last year. And so that's been nice. And again, the prints can be added after the fact. The other big thing I learned, and it came to me late last year, so I just did it as like a treat for people who bought the calendars, is that we put together an ICS file, which you could load into Google Calendar or the calendar app on your Mac or whatever, that included all day events for all the stuff in the calendar. So you can, like, for instance, I leave it turned off on mine, but I can see that the original iBook and Airport were demoed on stage in 1999 earlier this week.
That's the one where Phil Schiller jumped off the platform, right?
Jumped off the platform. Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
That really was like an idea that came pretty late in the game last year. This year, I knew I wanted to do it so I could include it kind of from the get-go, and you can get it if you do the digital-only package. So that is something that was not in the original plan last year, but I actually have been thinking about it. And actually, one of my uncles, like, because my dad was like telling his brothers about this, and my uncle Bill is actually a Mac user, and like he's like, well, could I get like a digital version of the calendar? And it was like light bulb went off. I was like, yes, that's a great idea. You're not getting a PDF of it, you're getting an actual digital calendar of all the dates. So that's kind of like a fun bonus thing, and I think people enjoyed that because it was an unexpected treat last year.
Yeah, that's nice. And honestly, the thing I love about it is I know that you have this journalism degree and you have a background in layout. And we live in a world where it's really hard to make a living as a journalist and nobody does layout anymore. But you found a way to do both and you combined it in this project. And I don't know. I think that's really cool, the way you've taken those skills to make this thing for the world.
Thanks, man. It's also fun to make something physical. You and I make podcasts and blog posts and videos for a living. And it's very rare that we get to make something we can actually put our hands on. And that was really fun. Like when I did work, like in my high school and college newspaper, especially the college newspaper, because we published 4 times a week. Like every class I went to, everyone had a copy of the thing I made on their desks, like every day, right? And most of them didn't know I had anything to do with it, but it was cool just to see the thing that you made out in the world. And I have absolutely loved it this year. I get a little flurry of these the first of every month when people turn the page and see the new photo of the calendar hanging in someone's office or their kitchen or wherever. That's really cool. And so it's been fun to kind of get back into that world a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly why I'm so interested all of a sudden in getting back into woodworking. I used to do it avidly, but, between 2 careers and kids and everything, I kind of got out of it for a few years. But we're in the process of cleaning, so I can do it. But I want to do some stuff with my hands. It's just, I want to create still, but I don't want to, I want to do something physical, cut a set of dovetails or something. Anyway, great job.
Thank you. The last thing I want to touch on just quickly was fulfillment, because I got some questions about this last year. So I used Kickstarter, obviously, for the campaign. And then I use a service called BackerKit, which just integrates with Kickstarter and gives me lots of options. So you can purchase add-ons after the fact, like if you want more stickers or you want the prints or something. But BackerKit will integrate with a service called ShipStation, which lets me buy postage, put in all the, if it's an international shipment, put in all the stuff I need for that, print the labels, and it's kind of like this web dashboard that handles all of those things. And that worked really well last year, so I'm going to do it again this year. I have done some things to make the fulfillment easier. Getting rid of the prints for the most part is going to be a huge thing. The sticker artwork is done early this year, so I've actually ordered a set of stickers already. And then when the campaign closes here in a few days, I'm going to order what should be the rest of them and go ahead and get those all like put in little baggies and ready to go before the calendars even show up. And so I think by staging that a little bit better, it will be a smoother process. And I'm hopeful to get the calendars back from the printer a little earlier this year so I can start on this. At least getting a bunch of stuff packed. And then hopefully my plan is after September ends, because we do Relay FM for St. Jude the month of September, to be able to hit it in the beginning of October and start getting things out. So Everyone should have them in plenty of time for the new year, but I'm hopeful by learning about some of my mistakes last year, because last year I'd basically everything show up at the same time. I also didn't really know last year of like, how do I package these things? Like, how do I, like, I didn't really realize, oh, I need a little baggie to put all the stickers in, or the stickers kind of get lost in the calendar and you have to like shake the calendar open to find the stickers. Like, well, that's not the experience I want. I want it to be really nice when you open this thing up to like, here are the stickers, here are the prints if you order them, here's the calendar. And so now I have all that knowledge and I have a bunch of links to stuff I bought last year for the fulfillment that I can just repeat this year. So I think the experience will help me as well.
Something else I would do in your shoes is when you finish this year, sit down and write a journal entry out about what went right, what went wrong.
Yeah.
Like when it's fresh in your mind, kind of a post-action report, and then go back and read it next year, assuming you do it again, to see what you learned from. And, I think that's a really good way to learn from these projects. But if you wait until the next time you start it up again, you'll have forgot all the stuff that was actually useful to you.
Yep, I did that. I did that last year, and that's actually where like the idea of dropping the prints came from. Was like that was the biggest hassle, and I had a question last year of like, do people really care about these? And from hearing from people in the year since, like most people weren't super jazzed about them, and so I was like, well, that's kind of 2 + 2 = 4 in terms of that part of it.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by TextExpander. Go to textexpander.com/MPU to learn more and get 20% off of your first year. Man, do I love TextExpander. I'm in the middle of declaring war on email right now. With this big transition in my life, I'm getting a lot more email than I used to, and I had to figure out how to manage it. And you know what's playing a pivotal role in this? TextExpander. With TextExpander, you can become the boss of your email. You can create form emails where it fills in the subject line and it's the tab key. You can do those fill-in emails where it fills in the person's name for you. You have all sorts of great options. One of my favorite tricks in TextExpander is the search button. I've mapped it to Control-Option-Command-I. So if I'm in an email and I'm like, oh, I've written something like this before and saved a snippet, I just hold down those keys and I can search through all my thousands of snippets and get the right one in and type it very quickly. It's just so useful. And you can also use TextExpander with your team. They've got team communication so you can go faster. You can get the right message out to your customers and make sure everybody has exactly the right information. So here's how it works. You can store it. So you can keep your company's most used emails, phrases, and messaging right in your TextExpander account. Then you can share it, getting your whole team access to the content the way they need it every day, and then expand it. You can deploy the content you need with just a few keystrokes on any device. It's really great. I am such a fan of TextExpander. It helps me both with my company, but also personally, and I recommend you check it out if you haven't. And best of all, TextExpander is available on Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad. So get that 20% off your first year. What are you waiting for? Go to textexpander.com/MPU and check it out.
It is big beta time here at MPU headquarters. They're everywhere. I texted you a couple of weeks ago. I was like, hey, how's the watchOS beta? And you were like, it's fine. Anyways, I'm running the watchOS beta now.
Yeah, I gave you a very wishy-washy answer. I'm like, it's running fine, but your battery's going to die some days.
Yeah.
Did that come true for you?
Yep. I've had a couple of days where like 6 p.m. for no real reason. It's like, oh, I'm in low power mode. It's like, come on, man. But it's a beta. The iOS, my phone battery life's not very good either right now. But that's always part of it this time of year. But I want to check in to see how they're treating you.
Yeah, well, on the battery issue, before we get into the content, when I'm running betas, I always keep things plugged in and charging. On my desk, I have one of those Studio Neat docks that you told me about. I forget what it's called.
The material dock.
The material dock. I got the one with two. It's got a thing for the Apple Watch and a thing for, a puck for the phone. And during beta season, if I'm going to be working at my computer for any length of time, I'll take my watch off and just charge it during the day and my phone. And I don't really do that much during the rest of the year. But beta time, you do that, and the relevance of this is we've also had the public beta released since, we talked about it last. So I know a lot of listeners are trying it out as well. So I guess let's start out with, what are we running?
Yeah, I've got it all, baby. I've got Ventura on my laptop. My desktop obviously won't be on the beta ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
iOS 16 on my phone. I have iPad OS 16 on my iPad Pro, which is a 2018 model, so I don't have Stage Manager on that. My iPad Mini is not on the beta. And then Watch OS 9. It's
Yeah.
it's a thing.
Yeah, I'm all the way down the rabbit hole too. I had a loaner laptop. We talked about this last week, but I had to give it back to the guy. His wife needed it. But so I unwound that and put it back into Monterey. And then I on my desktop, I made a boot drive for Ventura. I guess I should talk that through a little bit. It's really not that difficult if you're curious about it. What you do is you get an external drive, and I recommend an SSD if you can. I have a 2 terabyte Samsung. I think it's a T5. It's one of those little tiny SSDs. They're very small. And I use it. I just kind of put extra data on it when I go out of town and stuff. And so I wiped it and formatted it APFS. And then you download the beta installer. Even the public beta installer will work for this. And when you're going through the install process, at some point they show you your primary Macintosh HD or whatever it's called, and they say, hey, you want us to install this? But underneath it says view other drives or something to that effect. So you got to click that. If you're not paying attention and you just click through, you install it on your main drive and you've just upgraded your main machine, But if you click it, yeah, exactly. If you click it, then it'll give you that attached SSD. And I installed to that, and I did not do a migration. I just did like a clean install. So I'm just kind of testing it. And when people ask me questions about stuff, I did a video for the labs on continuity camera, which I may want to talk about here in a minute. So it's fine as a test machine set up from an external SSD. It's not quite as fast as it would be if it was internal, but it's fine. And now that I have a second Mac, I am currently, because I'm about to leave on vacation as we record this, I'm leaving it on Monterey because I may need to do some recording when I'm on vacation. But when I get back, I'll probably upgrade that one to the beta as well.
Yeah, Ventura's been surprisingly pretty good. I've had a couple of times where I've opened my laptop and clearly it's kernel panicked when it's asleep because it's like rebooting and I get the send your report to Apple. But in terms of app compatibility, the only things I've had issues with are, of course, the audio applications, which again, every year, it's how it goes. Audio Hijack doesn't run on betas. I have edited on it in Logic, and Logic mostly works on Ventura. I've had some issues with like performance, and like Logic will get kind of choppy and I have to restart it. I don't know what that's about. But all in all, like really, I think across the betas, if you're worried about, oh, is my application going to break under it? I really haven't seen much of anything. It's very different than, say, Catalina, which of course ended 32-bit support, which we talked about ad nauseum back in the day.
Yeah.
But it's one of those sort of quieter years in terms of breakage, which is always welcome.
Yeah, I mean, the most apps that people use, I have no trouble. All my productivity apps work. All my utility apps work. The other apps I'm having trouble with are recorded relating apps. Like I tried to do some QuickTime recording of an attached iPhone for a labs video, and it was just acting wonky in Ventura. And then ScreenFlow, which is the app I use to screencast. Now it's doing capture okay now, but editing is just weird stuff is happening when I try to edit. And I'm like, wait, why is this not working? And I realize, oh, I'm on a Ventura machine. If I take the file over to a Monterey machine, it works fine. So I'm sure they'll get that sorted out at some point, but that is that's a limitation for me, but I don't think a lot of people are using those kinds of apps. But you're right. I mean, for most stuff like word processing and browsing and mail and all that other stuff, everything seems to just be working. And I've got some pretty exotic utilities on my Mac, and they all seem to work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really at a point now because these are annual releases that those big overturns, they're not they're not every year anymore. It's really every 3 or 4 years where Apple's like, "Okay, we're ending support for X," or we had some of this with Big Sur, I remember, because there was a UI change on the Mac. It's like, okay, some apps, like, the controls may be a little bit broken until they update for it, right? But this time around, it's one of those quieter years. And even with things like Stage Manager on the iPad and the Mac, I feel like just about everything just works in them, you know. And I don't have a
Yeah.
ton of Stage Manager on the iPad experience, really, just as I've used other people's, but on the Mac at least, you know, I haven't really hit an app that like freaks out in Stage Manager. Apple
Yeah.
seems to have done a pretty good job at kind of, if your app supports the things it's supposed to support in terms of multi-window and resizable windows and stuff, then this just comes along with it.
Yeah. And we're going to do a whole show on Ventura when it releases.
Yep.
But because like Stage Manager right now, it seems like every major beta update, it changes in subtle but important ways. Like they're still kind of figuring it out. But I actually think there may be a place for Stage Manager for me. I mean, testing it, like having clusters of like communications app, productivity apps, planning apps. I've always done that with Spaces, but I've been experimenting with Stage Manager, and especially with this big screen, it could work for me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. We'll see. But, I also, as we record this, it's not even clear what the final controls are going to be for it. Another feature of Ventura that I've been doing a lot of testing on is continuity camera. And I'll tell you, I am sold. It looks great. I just did a video for the Labs members because I bought one of those Opal cameras, the one that Marquez Brownlee keeps talking about.
Yeah.
It's a great webcam, but it's $300.
It
And
better be a good webcam.
yeah, exactly. But it's got like a bokeh to it and great software. But I put that up next to the continuity camera. And honestly, I think the continuity camera looks just as good, if not better. I mean, if anything, the problem with the continuity camera is that it's such a good lens that like there was too much detail in my face. It's like I don't have a face that looks good in that resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Like when all the movie stars were angry when they went to 4K movies or 4K video, they're like, I'm going to look terrible. You feel like
Yeah.
that. It's kind of that kind of problem. And the other thing is I'm not using a cable with it. I'm just, hanging it on the top of my Mac display. It doesn't get hot. There's no buttons to push. It's just the implementation is great. The point down bit doesn't work for me. I think it's the height of my monitor or whatever. I can't seem to get that aligned properly. But the facing out part is great. And I feel like they really did it in a way that anybody will be able to use it. Of course, you lose use of your phone while it's being your camera, but, so be it.
Yeah. And you can use an older iPhone, but a lot of the features require a pretty new phone. So like if you have like an iPhone 7 laying around, not necessarily going to get you all the way where you want to go. Some of the stuff requires like a 10R or later, or like even an 11 Pro or later. But I mean, it makes sense, right? The iPhone is a really good camera. Why not use it as a webcam? And it is nice that it's basically just, I mean, it's not even plug and play. It's just like bring your phone nearby and play because it does all the cool auto pairing stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, nice work. What about on the phone? Anything standing out for you?
Yeah, I do like the lock screen stuff where you can bring the widgets and everything to it. Obviously, that's early days, and like I only have a couple of third-party widgets because I'm lucky enough to be on some betas. But it'll be, I think, like regular widgets were. Like in the fall, people are just going to freak out putting widgets on their lock screen, and then we'll kind of figure out what we want. I've already changed mine several times. I do have some complaints about the way the feature is structured. Like in beta 3, which is the current beta as we record this, they've done a little bit to help this, but Apple really wants the lock screen and home screen to kind of be linked in a way. And you can still set separate ones, but it's not as easy as it should be. I think it should still be relatively easy to change the home screen and leave the lock screen alone. Again, you can do it, but you got to jump through some hoops. But the biggest thing for me is that you can't duplicate a lock screen to like, okay, I really like the way this one is set up. Let me duplicate it and just change the photo out or just change one thing about it. And it means when you create a new one, you're basically starting from scratch every time. And that's a little frustrating.
Yeah, I feel like they haven't sorted out the whole lock screen, home screen synchronization because it's inconsistent for me. Like, I like the idea. And one of the things I like about the lock screen is the combination with the focus modes. So you can make lock screens tied to focus mode. So you can change your focus by changing your lock screen, which
Mhm.
is, one more trigger among many. I like set my podcasting focus mode this morning before we start recording with my watch, but I could have done it in Control Center and the lock screen or
Yeah.
through automation and all these ways. So I love that. But I want a matching home screen for each lock screen. Like,
Hmm.
I like the idea. Like, I've made this kind of green lock screen that's got kind of the MPU colors on it when I podcast, and I want the home screen to reflect that too. So it's like a contextual computing thing. I look at my phone, I'm like, okay, I'm in podcasting mode, but I can't get it to stick consistently. So the whole thing feels broken right now. And I don't know. I've submitted a ticket. I don't think it's performing as they expect it to. And that's something that I think definitely needs to get fixed before they ship.
All of that just feels a little rough. But again, it's early and like it's such a big change.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that is really cool, and it reminds me there's so much of this that reminds me of the watch face system. Like even some of the mechanisms and gestures are the same,
Yeah.
but they've put together a gallery of like select lock screen colors and a couple of examples. But it will also go through your photo library. And mine took several days. Then it finally kind of popped up of like, here are a bunch of photos we think would look good on a lock
Yeah.
screen. So they're kind of doing their thing of like suggesting things that look good. But I expect some more refinement here before it's all over.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get it. And I think the third party integration is going to be great. Like someone like me is going to love having an OmniFocus widget in the lock screen and, whatever David Smith comes up with. I
Hmm.
feel like right now it's not, the widgets aren't there yet. And I also don't like the way they arrange themselves automatically. I think that we should be able to set the arrangement. And
Oh yeah.
I don't think we're going to get that because I
Nope.
feel like that's probably not on the list between now and launch. But so there's things I don't like about it. I really like switching topics. I really like focus mode. The changes they've made to focus mode are very powerful. I'll talk about this more when they release it to the public and everybody can use it. But yeah, focus modes have got even better. And I know that you are suddenly very interested in the Reminders app.
Yeah. So for years, there's been a feature missing from reminders that has really kind of broken the way that I work. And that's that I want the app to show me on the badge how many tasks are overdue or due today. And like OmniFocus, things, Todoist, remember the milk, like any task manager, good tasks, any task manager I've ever used has had this feature. And the way it's worked in reminders is that it's been only able to badge overdue tasks. And so if a task due date or time passed by and the task wasn't marked as complete. And last year in the beta cycle, the feature that I wanted was there briefly and then it got removed. This year, I was at WWDC. I was once again sort of like thinking about this and I wrote a blog post about it. And I used a super clickbaity title. Apple could get me to switch to reminders with this one weird trick. And I filed feedback and I got what I wanted. In beta 3, they added this toggle where you can tell reminders the badge should match overdue and due today tasks. Actually, the way they did it is it matches the today smart list, which is perfect. And so for the last couple of weeks, I was like, well, I'm going to give this a shot because Reminders has a lot of really cool features because it's integrated with the system. So you can use Siri and say, remind me of this. And if you're looking at a text message or whatever, it will have a link to that message. There's also a really cool feature. You can, of course, do location aware reminders and that sort of thing. But you can say, next time I'm messaging with David, remind me of this. And so say that, I needed to ask you about something about your studio expansion, but it's not important right now. I don't want to bug you about it. But next time we're just chatting, I'd like to be reminded, hey, you were going to ask David about this. That feature is sweet. And so I've spent the last couple of weeks, I spent about 2 hours one afternoon picking up my entire task list from Todoist and rebuilding it in reminders. And so far, it's okay. The UI in reminders, especially on the Mac, is very click heavy. There's some smart text entry, Todoist, you can basically type everything in a sentence and it figures out where it needs to go. There's some of that. And there are a couple of third-party apps, one on the Mac and one on iOS, that basically do this for you. But you're doing a lot of clicking in reminders. I also don't love that lists seem to be a lower priority to Apple than tags. And so if you're in the Today view and you want to move a task from one list to another, you can only do it with drag and drop on the Mac because the inspector pane lacks, for some reason, a list selector, even though it is there in the inspector on iOS and iPadOS. And I've opened to feedback about that, so hopefully they listen. But the Mac app at least feels a little older than the iOS app, and I wouldn't mind the Mac app being a little bit fresher. But it syncs really well. It's cool to having the system stuff. I'm going to give it a shot over the summer and see how it goes.
I really like reminders. I had started doing kind of a deep dive on it for the Mac Sparky Labs, and then Apple announced all these changes, and I shelved it. I'm going to do it again after this releases, because I think it's so much better. But I feel like and I'm still an OmniFocus user. I've been trying to actually replace it. I've been looking at all these other apps saying, well, is this better? Is this something? I did a big experiment in Obsidian, and for what I do, OmniFocus is still awesome. I mean, Sal Segoyan, I should talk about this later in the show, but he just wrote an entire voice control system for OmniFocus. You can control the entire app now with your voice. It's crazy. But that being said, if you don't want to go that far, I feel like Reminders has gone from a beginning app to an intermediate app.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done a very good job. And it does have certain benefits that nobody else has because it's got, that integration. So, with the operating system that nobody else has. I totally predict this is going to be successful for you, and you're going to end up being happy with it because, why not? It makes it so much easier when you use the system app.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that they've done a good job in bringing those other features on. I'm not a big tag person, but Reminders has some great tag support now, and you can have your smart list, pick up tags. And so I did think about tags are one of the things that are picked up as the text interpretation system. And so I did think, instead of lists, I could have a bunch of smart lists and just use tags. And I'm not a tag person, but maybe I adopt it for this. So I think there'll still be some change. And of course, there's still going to be changes throughout the betas, hopefully. But this is I've been running it for, I think, 3 weeks at this point. This is by far the longest I've ever lasted. And I would like to move to it. I like the idea of being in the sort of the stock app because it has all those integrations. They just need to continue to improve it because, task managers, and we've talked about this before, they are apps that sort of live and die by their preferences because everyone wants things a little bit different. To OmniFocus credit, you can customize almost everything about it, right? You can do things with perspectives. If you don't get the view you want, you can just build your own. You can use all these different input methods and metadata around your task to build exactly what you need. And Todoist and some others, good tasks, they kind of do that through various means. And Reminders has to adopt more of that stuff because no two people want it exactly the same way. I mean, look at my whole thing, right? Yeah. My whole thing was about this one very specific feature, and now they have it. It suddenly clicks for me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a lot more to cover with these releases, and we will when they go out. But I think in general, the betas are in pretty good shape, and I'm having a good time this year.
I think so too. It feels like a pretty solid year, and I think we still run our normal caveats of like I wouldn't put it on a production machine. Make sure you have backups, on and on and on. But it's kind of the smoothest summer I've had in a couple years, I think.
Yeah, maybe we should just say that when you know what, put it on your production machine, put it on the thing that you earn
No,
money on. And if there's any problem, send your email to Steven.
no,
That's well,
I don't know. No. This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by our good friends at Memberful. Memberful is the easiest way to sell memberships to an audience, used by the biggest creators on the web. Generate sustainable recurring income while diversifying your revenue stream with Memberful. Here at Relay FM, the membership program is powered by Memberful. It makes it super easy to generate extra revenue for our host while delivering really cool bonus content to our members. For us, this includes access to a Discord, a monthly newsletter that we actually send through Memberful. They have this new post feature. Those newsletters also end up on a blog that you can log into as a member. And then, of course, the ad-free longer episodes of a bunch of our shows. And with Memberful, we can do all of that in one place. I'm not going around building something from a bunch of different components. And I really appreciate that as a business owner. Memberful makes it easy to diversify our income with everything we need for a membership program, including custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay support, free trials, private podcasts, and ton more. And they leave us in full control and ownership of everything that relates to the audience, brand, and membership. If you're a content creator, Memberful can help you monetize your passion. Get started for free at memberful.com/MPU. There's no credit card required. That's memberful.com/MPU, or check out the link in the show notes. It could be the start of something really exciting for your creative projects. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of the show and Relay FM.
So you and I are both Alfred users. Since the last time we did a feedback show, Alfred has released a major new update. Alfred 5 is out. Have you got it installed?
Yeah, I've been running it. It was announced as a beta about a month ago, and I didn't jump on it then, but I put it on basically the day it was announced that it was out. There's this long post over on the Alfred site. We have it in the show notes outlining everything new in Alfred 5. And in this version, most of the focus seems to be around workflows and automation. And so workflows is kind of the term that Alfred uses to build. I mean, you can build almost anything. So you can build like, hey, I want to run these sorts of commands from within Alfred. So it could be as simple as, for instance, I have one, as goofy as it is, to search a couple of different GIF websites. Because sometimes I want a GIF to send to a friend or to put in a tweet. And I have a workflow set up that take the text that I enter, make it the search parameter in these URLs, open these URLs in new tabs. And you can go up from there to really complicated things. And that whole engine and mechanism got a big overhaul this time.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that it got democratized. Historically, I mean, they've had workflows in Alfred now for at least one version. I think it started with version 3, and now we're on 5. But it's always been difficult to create these workflows because a lot of it was like real scripting, like JavaScript or whatever you were doing to make it work. And if you looked at the more advanced workflows, and there were a bunch of popular ones we would all download, the person that put that together really understood programming at a level that a casual or even a power user would not understand. And what they've done now is they've turned it into more of a shortcut / keyboard maestro sort of drag and drop. And they have all of these actions now available. And it's awesome. I mean, like you can really put together some interesting workflows now because it's all there, right for you. Whether you want to collect data from the user, whether you want to perform actions on that data, whether you want to deal with file operations. And you can still put, like the catch-alls, the workflow steps that do insert code if you want. And what I predict is a lot of people that couldn't make their own workflows before will be able to do so now.
Yeah, it's way simpler to bring in kind of pre-built sections. And so now on the right hand side of the workflow editor, you have, it's very similar. Like if you use Keyboard Maestro or other automation tools, the language is very similar where you have triggers, inputs, actions, and you can build them. And what's really cool about the workflow editor in Alfred, has been this way for a while. It's kind of like Audio Hijack is, where you kind of drag and drop these blocks and you can kind of control the flow of the workflow. But now you have a really easy way to use these pre-built sections, and you can even save your own. And so if you have a block or two that you want to use in multiple workflows, you can save that as what Alfred calls a prefab, and like use that block of automation across multiple workflows as you build them out in the future. It's all just much easier to do. I mean, if I look through the ones I've done, almost all of them dump out to like a bash script to run what I'm going
Yeah.
to do just in the command line. And
Yeah.
there's still going to be some of that probably depending on what you want to do. But I think for a lot of people, they're going to be able to manage this in a much more sort of drag and drop kind of friendly way.
Okay, so just to give you an example, so every automation starts with a trigger. If you've watched any of my field guides, you've heard the speech that there's a trigger and then there's an action. That's what makes an automation. The trigger is what triggers it. So new triggers that are available with drag and drop is pressing a hotkey, pushing a button on the Alfred remote app, using a text snippet, external triggers from AppleScript, so you can send them in from the AppleScript system. If you perform an action on a file, if you do a universal action, if you change a contact, they've got all these ways now that you can trigger actions. And then from that, you can collect inputs, like you can type something in the keyboard or get a filter to a file or a list. And then the actions that are available, once it's triggered, you can open files, launch apps, reveal files in Founder, browse the terminal, browse in Alfred, perform actions in Alfred, which, Alfred has a ton of actions available. Do a web search, open a URL, run a script. It just goes on. And there is a terminal command, Stephen. So you don't even have to do it a bash script. You can go straight to the terminal now. Automations is you can run shortcuts now as part of a workflow automation.
Which is really cool.
So just as an aside, Rose and I released episode 106 of the Automators recently, automation interoperation. That was Rose's word, by the way.
That's good.
And I thought it was very British. So I'm like, okay, we got to use that. But what I was going to say is automation integration, because on the Mac, we are going through something right now where Keyboard Maestro can do almost anything with shortcuts, and then shortcuts can do almost anything with Keyboard Maestro, and Hazel can run shortcuts, and now Alfred can run shortcuts. It's like, it is crazy what is going on now, because we've got a superset of automation tools. This is, we talk about this being the golden age for Mac hardware. This is a golden age for Mac automation, because you can mix and slice and dice all these automation tools together, choose your platform of choice, but still use the cool parts of the other ones. I mean, it is awesome what's going on right now. But this is just one more example of that, but I'm going to get on a soapbox again if I keep talking about this. But it is great. If you like shortcuts, but you also like Keyboard Maestro, you can combine them now to do some really remarkable automation.
Yeah. And, sometimes we get questions about what tools should I use? Like, there's overlap between a bunch of these utilities. And I think that Alfred now, it kind of comes into that conversation in a bigger way because of these new automation tools and workflow. And so I think we will circle back to Alfred 5 at some point in the future, but just kind of wanted to put a pin in it for now of if you were using automation in Alfred before, or if you already use Alfred as your app launcher, and you're looking to do a bit more, then it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, the upgrade is a no-brainer. Just really curious, Stephen, what Alfred workflows are you currently running?
I've got one that is basically just a Google search with Google suggestions, which is awesome. I've got an old one that all it does is it lets you run any shortcut. So you just type the keyword and then you can arrow down and just like pick a pick a shortcut.
Is that the one from Victor
This is from
or Vitor?
someone named Lucas.
Okay, there's a bunch of different ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing cool about Alfred too. There's a really big community of people building stuff for it. I've got one
Yeah.
called Mega GIF, which I described a second ago, which just searches some GIF websites.
I just want to tell the listeners, as Steven's friend, Steven loves gifts. I see them so often from you.
I do what I can.
You're a gift guy. I like you
Gift guy.
sharing that with the world. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm young and hip. It's cool.
There you go. There you go. Of course you are. Although I'm not sure it's hip to say hip anymore, but there you go.
That's true. I've got somebody named Carl Smith, that is a time zone viewer and like management tool.
Yep, I do that one too.
Comes in clutch.
Always shows me Memphis.
Awesome. And then I've got a couple that I built myself, again, basically just using bash scripts to search the Internet Archive in different ways. So I have one where I can give the Internet Archive a keyword and it will just search all of their archives. And then one I use a lot is I can pass it a URL. So like if I'm visiting like maxsparky.com and I want to see what the Wayback Machine has for MacSparky, I can start this workflow, paste in the URL, and then it will load automatically that search within the Internet Archive for that URL. I use that one a ton for work stuff.
Yeah, nice. I use several of those and a couple more that I use. I'm using an awesome OmniFocus one by Red Lewis that lets me search and jump into anywhere in my OmniFocus database. It's using dot commands, like .f is .folder, .p is .project. So I can just type .f space MacSparky and it goes to my MacSparky folder. Just really, really powerful to be able to do that from Alfred. I'm always kind of working on some test ones that I'm building. I took the native folder search one, and I did a video for this in the MacSparky Labs too, but I took the native folder search and I customized it for different folders. Like a lot of times I wanted to get to just folders. Like when I have a client list, I made one that if I just type CL period, then it only searches for folders in my client folder. And then I could get to those very quickly. 1Password's got a plugin, and in fact, they've got a new one. Emoji Taco I was playing with, but then I started using Rocket for emoji, so that one went away. And then just for fun, I put the Magic 8-Ball in there, just to see it,
That's good.
Because you can do a Magic 8-Ball, and and there's an Obsidian one that's very powerful too. But yeah, I'm going to be working on more of these now that they've made it more human friendly for me to build them.
Yeah.
GW wrote in asking about password managers and built-in password managers. Obviously, 1Password's been a sponsor of the Mac Power Users forever, but we also use the built-in stuff. And I thought, let's talk through this.
Yeah. So obviously, Apple has its own password manager now. It's in Mac OS, iOS, and iPad OS. It's in settings or system preferences. It's also in the preferences pane for Safari itself, which is kind of like where it started life a long time ago.
Yeah.
I would still like to see this be a freestanding application, but I guess I kind of understand why it's in settings. But it syncs with iCloud if you have that turned on. It supports two-factor authentication, and it supports a notes field, which is surprisingly handy sometimes if you have a login. Like, for instance, if you have a login that requires a password and a PIN to enter, that's not a two-factor, but like just a regular PIN code, store that in there, other notes, and that all syncs to all of your devices. It also supports passkeys, which we haven't talked about because it's extremely difficult to explain. But it's basically a concept that would replace passwords one day using your device itself as authentication for who you are.
Yeah.
And Apple is a big proponent of that.
And it's just also newly announced. I mean, this is a thing that comes with Ventura, and the way passkeys need to work is actually people out on the internet need to adopt them, which hasn't happened yet because it's not out yet. But we'll be covering this more as it becomes something you can actually use. But I love that Apple is doing this. I think it's great. And so many people for so long used the same one or two passwords on all websites, because they just didn't know better and weren't willing to like go deeper. I mean, we've been beating the drum on this forever, not only in relation to 1Password ads, but just on the show in general, even before 1Password was a sponsor, the importance of having strong and unique passwords for each website. And Apple has now made this super easy for anyone to do for website logins. So I love that they're doing it. I think it's a great introductory feature. There are limits to it. I mean, it really only is for web logins. But at the same time, this is getting a lot of people to be way more secure with passwords that wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, it is. And because it's just built into Safari and places like the iOS keyboard, it's not a burdensome thing to take on.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem to really work outside of Safari, right?
So it depends. So on the Mac, it only works in Safari. Apple has Chrome and Edge extensions for Windows, and some of Apple's documentation says this extension works on the Mac, but it doesn't. And so I don't know what the deal is with that, if it's broken or the documentation is wrong, probably the latter. But if you use Chrome on the Mac, you're not using iCloud password stuff, at least right now, which is a real bummer. And it feels, if that's on purpose, that feels really petty, and they should get over that.
And then Chrome has its own password manager too. And I have very little experience with this because I'm not a Chrome user. I mean, I think it uses too many system resources. I get that it's got great plugins and a bunch of extra things that we don't get with Safari, but I've kind of made my bed there. And I'm also just a little less confident in Google to hold my passwords than Apple. And I don't have a basis for that. So, call me a fanboy or whatever, but it seems like the focus on privacy at Apple makes me more comfortable letting them manage and create passwords for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The Chrome password manager, it just works within Chrome, so there's no offline support. There's no exporting a password to share it. There's no two-factor authentication support. And there is an argument to be had that your two-factor authentication and your
Manager.
your password should be separate places. Mine are all in 1Password. I don't worry that much about it, but Chrome's built-in thing doesn't have 2FA support. So yeah, I mean, if you're all in on Chrome and it does work cross-platform anywhere Chrome is, this would work. And I think a lot of people do use it because Chrome is the most popular browser on the planet, but it's not something that I use.
Yeah, and then not because they're a sponsor, but because I pay every year for 1Password. And I guess I should explain. Most of our sponsors, I don't take free subscriptions from them. I pay for OmniFocus, I pay for 1Password, I pay for these apps because
Same.
I use them. I feel like there's part of it, some of these people I know, right? But I feel like it's not being fair to them. I'm not getting these apps to evaluate them. Sometimes I do get a free license to something to evaluate it, but if I incorporate it into my workflow, I become a pay member. I just paid my $50 to 1Password a few months ago. But either way, so I pay for these apps, and the reason is it just does so much more. It's not because they sponsor the show. Frankly, if they cancel their sponsorship, I'm not going to stop using it. 1Password has secure notes, which I love. I mean, just recently I did an audit of all my medical stuff, and I just wanted to keep it in 1Password, so it's there. I think I did an ad spot on it a few weeks ago for them, but that is a very useful tool for me. I also like that it stores more kinds of data, like software licenses. I just had to, because I got this new laptop, I'm installing all the Rogue Amoeba stuff. Well, I've got all these Rogue Amoeba licenses, and those built-in solutions don't do that. So this solves that problem. And then 1Password, there's just a bunch of benefits that come from 1Password. And I'm not saying just 1Password. There are other password managers out there. Was it LastPass is another one a lot of people use. And we've talked about that on the show too before. But the fact that there's a company where everybody there is like, okay, how can we make a product that makes it easier and better? Well, one of the features 1Password has is Watchtower, which is a free service that comes with your account where they monitor the websites you have passwords for. And then when you go to 1Password, it says, oh, you're at site xyz.com. They got hacked, 2 months ago, and we think you should really change your password or cancel your account because right now, whatever password you had there is now public. And that is a great service, and I love it, and then multiple vaults, so I can have a vault for work and home. I guess I can go on and on, but sharing is another one. Like because we're in the family plan, we share passwords. There's a lot of good reasons to get back to GW's question, to use the built-in stuff. And if you're not going to be willing to buy something, please use the built-in stuff. But if you want to take it to the next level, there are great solutions out there too that do more. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Indeed. Start hiring now and only pay for quality applications matching the sponsored job post. Just go to Indeed.com/MPU. So here's a quick puzzle for you. What would you do if your business had to hire great people fast? Here's a hint. You need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. One of the things that's really cool about Indeed is how they just know how to make hiring pain-free. Like how Indeed puts you in control of what you pay. You set your must-have job requirements and only pay for the applications that meet them. There's a transparent flat fee per application, and you can pause your job posting whenever you want. Even better, Indeed's the only job site where you only pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring partner, delivering 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest in 2019. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast, and Indeed's doing something no other job site has done. Now with Indeed, businesses only pay for quality applications matching the sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/MPU to start hiring now. That's Indeed.com/MPU. Go there now and check it out at INDEED.com/MPU. Terms and conditions do apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And our thanks to Indeed for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
We had an email from listener Jen asking us to talk through our smart home setups. You want to do that?
Constantly evolving? Is that the answer?
Yeah. So what do you have going on?
I am, Lutron switches. I've talked about them on this show now for years, and I love them. I mean, I started slowly buying them because it was like when I bought them, it was around $100 to get started, and the switches without the base station were around 60 or 70, and I think they're actually less expensive now. But so I would like every couple months just buy another one. But now the whole house is wired to these Lutron switches, and we had the problem I had was I was using light bulbs, like smart light bulbs, but then if somebody turns off the switch, smart light bulb doesn't work, or if they throw the switch and the light bulb doesn't turn on, then they get really mad at me, and I don't want my wife mad at me. So the Lutron switches solved all the problems because they act as independent switches, but they also are always connected to automation. So my lighting situation is very settled and very good. I've got it running all over the house. I've created all these different scenes. So no matter what I'm doing, I can set the lights very easily. And honestly, this is one of the best uses for HomePods and Siri, telling it to turn the lights off in a room. It does that without fail. And I like that. One bit of lighting I did was I got a set of strip lights, home kit friendly strip lights, and I put them along the edge banding of my desktop, of my work desk. And at night, I kind of like to turn that on, and it's like backlighting my desk. That's kind of a cool lighting thing I've done. So I guess that's my story on lighting. What are you doing with lighting?
Yeah, my lighting is pretty simple. At some point, I'd like to go through my house and do Lutron switches. I just haven't done it.
It is so worth it. I mean, really, I think that's the best HomeKit thing you can do today
Yeah.
is change your switches.
Yeah, I need to find some time where I could take the house apart and do that. We have several lamps on these iHome control smart plugs. I've had them a long time. They work with the Amazon system and HomeKit because for a long time I had the Amazon system in the house and switched all to HomeKit a couple of years ago. But they plug into the wall, then you plug the light into them. So we have lamps, multiple lamps throughout the house plugged into these. And I have, like, if the Christmas tree's up, I have the Christmas tree plugged into these. The thing about these that I don't really love, and like if I didn't have them, I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. Maybe find like I think the Miros ones are probably a little bit better for this use because there have been times where they are unresponsive because the iHome app is not connecting the way it's supposed to, and so they show up in HomeKit and they work in HomeKit, but you also have the iHome app kind of in the middle, which I don't really love. But again, I've had them a long time, so I haven't replaced them. And I have some automated scenes set up for like, okay, like an hour before sunset, turn these lamps on and turn them off at midnight or whatever.
I don't remember who it was that told me. I think it might have been Bob Spivak, who was a guest on the show a while ago, who's a home automation expert, who said that the Lutron has their own spectrum, their own signal spectrum. But whatever it is, the Lutrons, that's the other thing, is they just always work. I mean, I never have like an interference problem, even with the number that I'm running in the house. Man, I sound like I'm in the bag for Lutron, don't I?
I mean, I know they make good stuff. I know people really like them.
Yeah. Now, camera situation for me, I've been slowly building up my collection of Eufy, EUFY cameras. I believe that company is a subsidiary or related company to Anchor, but I don't quote me on that. But they're fairly inexpensive cameras. The thing I like about them is that they have local storage, like the doorbell cam and the outdoor cameras. They have SD cards built into them that are storing the camera data, so I don't have to pay for a cloud service. So often these cameras come with a cloud service, and then I don't really trust the cloud services, right? And then Apple has now got their own way. It's HomeKit. What do they call it? HomeKit video or HomeKit recording?
HomeKit secure video.
Secure video. I much more trust Apple than that. And most of my Eufy cameras connect right to that. So they show up in the Home app and they're recording to Apple's HomeKit secure video. So I don't have to worry about it. And I've been pretty happy with them. I had one on the front of the garage. There's a thing going around in Southern California. I don't know if it's true in the whole country, but people are stealing the catalytic converters off Priuses because apparently they're quite valuable. And my daughter has a Prius, so I have a camera that points right down at her car at night. And that one I've had like 3 years, and I put a solar charger. Eufy sells a solar charger, but the battery just gave up the ghost. You know, it just like you've recharged it for 3 years, even with the solar thing attached, it can't seem to hold on. But I don't really blame them. I think 3 years is about what you would expect out of a little tiny camera like that. So I just bought a new one. That was my sole purchase on, was it Amazon Day or whatever they call it? You know, what do they call that thing?
Amazon Prime Day.
On Amazon Prime Day, Eufy had a good sale, so I bought a new one and replaced that one. But yeah, in general, I'm pretty happy with the Eufy cameras. I'm not sure that they're the best quality cameras, but I get a good enough picture for the price, and it saves to Apple HomeKit secure video.
Okay. I totally forgot that I have a studio, so I'm going to back up to lighting for a second.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, talking about the house. So in the studio, I have a bunch of Hue lights on display cases, bookcases, a couple of standalone Hue lights. And that's all through the Hue app. And then, of course, in HomeKit as well. And then I also have several of these Elgato key lights. I have one here on my main desk. And I've got a couple on my overhead desk where the PC is. And those I control via Stream Decks, actually, at each computer. But in terms of cameras, I was in the Nest ecosystem for a really long time. And then they sort of revamped the camera lineup and their app. And the app at the time was really pretty bad. And I needed to purchase a couple more cameras to like cover the studio, the outside and the inside.
Yeah.
And so about a year ago, I guess, I actually switched over to Ring for that stuff. And it's kind of the antithesis of what you're doing. It is all cloud based. Um, and Ring has had some problematic policies in the past. I think most of those are behind them, and you can turn on end-to-end encryption on everything now. So I have that on, and I like the control that it gives me, and I like that through Homebridge, which is software you can run on like a Raspberry Pi. I run it on a Mac Mini. You can bring non-HomeKit accessories into your HomeKit world, and so I run a plugin for that brings control of my cameras and the because I have the Ring alarm on my studio, like with like a motion sensor and a bunch of other stuff, all into HomeKit. So I can set scenes like if I leave, hey, make sure all the Ring cameras are set in away mode, which means I get a notification if they see a person. I don't want those notifications when we're home, but when we're gone, I'd like to know if someone's in my backyard. And
Yeah.
that bringing that into HomeKit has been pretty sweet.
Yeah, I got some of those Eufy flood cams,
Hmm.
where it's like two LED floodlights with a camera attached to it.
Yeah, I've got two Ring cameras like that.
And they're really nice. And like the beauty of it is, I think I told you already about Ahsoka, my dog, and Moriarty, the squirrel, their running battle. I think I mentioned this on the show already, but there's a squirrel that my dog wants to kill. And those cameras get some great footage of various squabbles between those two. But the thing I don't like about them is they record to the SD card. They do not connect to Apple Secure Video.
Hmm.
So I don't get that saved automatically to my Apple Cloud, but I can see it in the app. So I guess if somebody wanted to break into my house and they ripped all those things off the side of the house and took them with them, I don't know, whatever. But so they're not ideal in that way, but I do like that they really light the yard up, and at least it's a camera running. I mean, honestly, anybody who comes to my house to rip it off, they're going to see so many cameras walking to the front door, the back door. I would hope that would be alone enough to discourage them.
Yeah, that's part of the game. I think
Yeah,
is that sort of thing. I mean, I've got one on my looks out my front porch, and if someone
yeah.
comes in my yard, they're gonna see it and they're gonna know they're on camera.
But the whole idea of the studio is for me, like we're going to talk about it today in the after show, but I am giddy with the idea of automation in a room that is my room, right? The studio is going to be my room. So motion sensors, crazy lighting, all that stuff, I'm going like all in on that. That's going to be the room where people walk in and don't understand what's going on. And I can't wait.
Yeah, that's gonna be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I feel like some of that stuff is like almost there. Like I had an issue with HomeKit Secure Video where the notifications were out of control. Like anytime a leaf came by, I thought it was a person. I think that's all
Yeah.
better. Like Apple has improved this as they've gone on, as have all these other companies.
Yeah. Something else I've done recently is I've gone deep on the Akara products. And this is another one where you have to buy a separate hub, but the products themselves are very inexpensive in comparison to other products on the market. And in particular, I had a friend who went on vacation and they had like a toilet leak and then they came home and like their house was wrecked.
Yeah.
And that got me thinking, well, I bet I could, prevent that with automation. And the Akara has these leak sensors that are really good and they're not that much money. And once you get the hub, then you just start buying them. So I now have them under the refrigerator, under the sink, by the dishwasher, and by the clothes washer. So I've got them in various pieces, and I've got them also in the bathrooms upstairs. So I've just got a really nice system now, and they absolutely work because I put one in by the fridge and I didn't put it like securely enough behind, and the dog got it, and my alarm went off. I'm like, oh no, the fridge is leaking, and it was actually just the dog licking and
Hmm.
chewing on it. But so they're really a good solution if you don't have a water leak solution. And I would recommend looking at these Akara products. And then they have a bunch of other ones. They have motion sensors too that are really cheap. Rosemary Orchard, and we've talked about this on the Automators podcast. She had an issue where she would work, but she'd be so still that the lights would go off,
Yeah.
because she's got all these automations. And her solution I thought was pretty smart. She put a car in motion sensor under her chair. So just, the motion of rocking in your chair or whatever keeps it going so it knows there's a human in the room.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I have Ring makes a water sensor, and I have it in
Yeah.
the pan for my hot water heater. But it is so, because the something about it, like it drops off the Ring network sometimes, and maybe this with putting the bridge like in the network closet, which is basically like 30 feet from the hot water heater, maybe that would be a better solution. And this stuff is cheap. It's like $18 on Amazon right now.
Exactly. In fact, I'm going to order another one because I didn't think of the water heater. Now it's like, now I need another one. And
yeah,
then
man, those things are time bombs.
just get a Sharpie and just write on it what you're, where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just set it on the floor behind it and you're good. And I, at one point my daughter said, "Dad, what is this thing in the bathroom?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "It's just a water sensor. It's not, I don't know what you think I'm doing, but it's a water sensor." And, but yeah, so just get a collection of them. I also did, I was so impressed with it that last year for Christmas, for several of the nerdier gentlemen in my life and women, well, 3 people, I bought a hub and several sensors for a bunch of people in my life and gave it to them because I'm like, oh, this will be fun for you. And, you have a house and you don't want it to get ruined by water either.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a nice upgrade I've done in the last year.
Yeah, that's cool. And it looks like the hubs are not too expensive either.
No, they're not. In fact, one of the things I've been experimenting with in the Max Sparky Labs, which I haven't finished yet, is putting a sensor on the flap of my mailbox, the front door of my mailbox.
Yeah.
My mailbox is 2 houses away from my house. And but my mailman, I don't think he likes to come to my house until like, 7 p.m. or something. But it's just crazy to me how late they are. But sometimes they'll show up at like 1 PM, and sometimes they'll show up when it's almost dark. So I thought, well, that'd be cool if I put a sensor there. I could give myself a notification when the mailbox opens, and then I'll know that the mail's here. But I'm having a range issue, and I bought a second. They have like a little USB stick, like booster, and I have it here. I just haven't installed it yet. I'm going to do a video for the labs on it. I just haven't got around to it yet. But yeah, so there's a lot you can do with those. When you make the sensors that cheap, suddenly ideas start coming up, and you don't mind spending $20 to give it a shot.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It'd be good to know when that shows up. Mine's on my front porch, so my camera picks up the mail person every afternoon.
Yeah, we actually had somebody blew up my mailbox at some point. Where I live is pretty peaceful and calm. There's not a whole lot of problems, but teenagers. I think they put an M80 in there.
Wow.
And so we just heard this big boom, and I went outside, and my mailbox was not there anymore.
That's incredible, but also terrible at the same time.
Yeah, I know. Teenagers. Now I need to point a camera at my mailbox.
There you go.
Whatever. It's all good. Another thing I've updated that I like is I bought some flick switches, FLIC.
Yeah.
And they're just there's little buttons. Have you seen these things before?
Yeah, they're basically just buttons that you can basically do anything with, right? Just about.
Yeah. And again, you got to get a hub with it. But once you get the hub, everything's working. Like, I think part of a home kit setup now is just to get a switch with like 30 Ethernet hubs like on it, because everything has a hub. But these little switches are great. So I've got one under my desk, at my desk, and when I press that, it turns the lights off or on in my studio. My existing studio, not the new one. I've got one taped to the side of the drawer in my bedside table. And there's 3 modes to it. You can press it once, you can press it twice, or you can long press it. So like a long press turns all of the the lights off in the bedroom. And so you can do, various setups with these. And it's just a switch you can stick anywhere. And once you throw it, it's a HomeKit switch. So you can tie anything to it that HomeKit can run.
Yeah, I definitely have a little pile of smart home bridges and stuff in my network closet. And I've got a couple out here in the office as well, because the the older Hue stuff requires one, and then I also have one for the shades in my studio. So if you've seen pictures of my studio, I have two windows that are really high, and I need to be able to, or I want to be able to control sunlight in here if I'm doing photography or video, and like basically black out the windows. And I went with these Serena smart shades. They're actually owned by the same company that does Lutron, and they have a bunch of options. Mine are custom because my window sizes are an unusual size. These were prohibitively expensive. I had this order set up for like weeks and I could just not pull the trigger. And then I finally did.
Yeah.
But it's got a bridge that's just plugged into my network out here in the studio. And they come with a little remote, but the bridge makes it HomeKit accessible. So I have them tied into some automation. So if they're open and it's an hour before sunset, I want them to close. And then if they're already closed, they don't do anything, right? So if I close them like on over a weekend, they stay closed till I come back out. And I, of course, can manually trigger them. I have them wired into some Stream Deck buttons so I can open and close them. Or I have a preset that they're open 50% of the way. And I can do that through HomeKit. And it's sweet. I mean, this is by far the most expensive smart home thing I've ever done and may ever do, unless I replace all my light switches with Lutron switches. But there was no way, because the height of these windows, there wasn't going to be a great way to do this sort of with a manual shades without like really long pull strings. And like, then you're running the risk, like, what if it jams? I got to get an extension ladder out to fix it. And these things are battery powered. They have like 6 or 8 D cell batteries in them. And I've run them for 9 months now, and they've been totally fine. In fact, a lot of the time, I kind of just leave them where they are. In fact, during the summer, I have disabled my 1 hour before sunset rule, because the reason I wanted that is in the winter when it gets dark earlier, and I'm still at work at 5:30 and it's getting dark. I didn't want the light in the studio to be visible outside, because like you can kind of see the studio from the street at a certain point, and I don't want to draw attention to it. But in the summer, I'm not out here that late, and so I've actually turned off that automation during the summer. Like I have no idea how long the batteries will last, but so far I've been really impressed, and they're easy to switch the batteries. They come with these mounts that you put into the wall, and then basically like the cover pivots up, and you can replace the batteries without having to take the whole thing down. And it was definitely a 2-person job to put them up there, but they will be up there for all time now.
Yeah, I have saved the link because this is like the kind of thing I would really like to do in the studio as well once it's done. But yeah, every time I've looked into these, they're super expensive from all vendors. And the most reasonable one I've ever seen is the stuff IKEA makes.
Yeah.
But that's very limited. I mean, there are set sizes and set colors.
Yeah.
If you want to make it look nice, you got to pay like 3 times to do it custom.
Yeah. And for me, I had to go custom because of the size of the windows, because it's just, these windows are actually recycled. We found them at some like construction supply place, and they've been pulled out of some commercial building. So like really well insulated, which is what I wanted to look really nice, but they're not a normal size at all. And so, and the casing in them is very deep because the walls are really thick in here for sound deadening.
Yeah.
And so I had to choose, like, do I want to mount them in the casing or outside the casing? I ended up doing outside the casing to get a better light seal, but I very quickly extinguished all possibilities of using a pre-made thing. But if one of the IKEA things does work for you, like, it is really sweet having shades or blinds to be part of your smart home. I mean, I really like it. I really do.
Yeah, I'm going to do some version of this in the studio. I may be using the IKEA ones. I don't know what I'll do, but that's like phase 2 of indoor studios. But I get it. Something about home automation I'm kind of excited about right now is an addition, and that is I ordered this thing called Home Assistant, and they've got the newest version is Home Assistant Yellow. And my understanding is it's supposed to ship to me in the next couple months. Rosemary Orchard has one of these. I mean, of course, we have a podcast called Automator, so home automation is a frequent topic. But Rose loves her home assistant. I think she rolled her own with she just built her own because there's a way to do it. But I didn't want to deal with it. I said, $150, just send me one. It's all done. I don't have to like monkey with it. But it uses a web interface, and as I understand it, it works with Apple HomeKit devices, but gives you way more control over them. And I don't know enough about it yet. Rose just said, I will really like this. So I ordered it. And when it comes in, I'll talk about it more on the show. But that is like coming down the road for me. And hopefully that gives me more control.
Yeah, this looks pretty cool. It's using a Raspberry Pi and some other stuff. And there's a lot of cool products like this. There's also one that will bring your Nest stuff into HomeKit.
Yeah.
I think called the Starling Bridge. There's a bunch of stuff out there. And of course you can just run Homebridge yourself. And a lot of people do run Homebridge on a Raspberry Pi, but I've got a Mac Mini. It's a 2018 Intel Mac Mini that's under the TV. Basically as a DVD player at this point. Like we don't even really, I mean, it is like the family iTunes. So anytime anybody buys something on iTunes, it gets downloaded, but that's so rare now between Apple Music and streaming services. But I have Homebridge running on that, which like you do not need a Mac to run Homebridge. In fact, it's actually kind of worse in a lot of ways because there was some version of macOS that it updated to, and it totally like blew up my Homebridge install because it updated some version of, some underlying system and had to rebuild it all. At some point, I will probably just rebuild it on a Raspberry Pi and just like tape it to the underside of my desk somewhere. But it is cool that we can add these things and get more control or bring things into the ecosystem that wouldn't be there otherwise.
And then the other thing on the home automation topic, of course, I think we should mention Matter. There is a joint consortium between Apple and Google and a lot of the people making this stuff where they're coming up with a single unified protocol for the devices all to talk. And I think what happened was when the big home automation race started, Apple was hoping that they would become the controlling platform, but they never did. Partly because they had embedded encryption in it that made it harder to get more adoption. But they have now kind of simplified that, so you're seeing more devices. At the same time, Google was hoping they'd become the controlling home automation platform. Basically, all these horses got in a race and they tied,
Yeah.
And I think the companies have just decided, or if they didn't tie, it's close enough that there's not a clear winner. And they decide, you know what, let's just make one thing so everybody can buy stuff and it'll work on all of the stuff. And that's Matter. And it's rolling out. I mean, Apple is signed on, and Google and the major players. So going forward, you're going to be wanting to look for equipment that supports Matter. And I think pretty much anything that supports HomeKit is probably going to support Matter.
Yeah, that's going to be really nice when that happens. I think there will probably still be some things that require like custom bridges or sort of other oddball hardware, but the hope is that stuff becomes less necessary and that whatever you get is going to work with Google, Amazon, and Apple. And I mean, right now, a lot of stuff has kind of gone that way, but even a couple of years ago, that was not the case. I mean, in the early days, it was like, I bought this Switch and it only works with Amazon, and now I'm switching to HomeKit, and I literally have to throw the Switch away because it doesn't work. And Matter's vision is that is a thing of the past, which would be awesome. This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by SourceGraph. So you've hired a new developer to join your team. That's awesome, but now you have to spend time getting them onboarded. If your company is growing, this is going to become a common occurrence, and onboarding a new developer is a big undertaking each and every time you have to do it. One of the biggest challenges for new hires is getting them up to speed with the project their team has already been working on. This is especially tricky if the code bases your developers are working in are already large. Thankfully, SourceGraph makes it easy to move quickly, even in those big code bases. Developers know that knowledge is most useful when it's findable. Centralization is helpful, but given the fact that most companies store knowledge in at least two different locations, making knowledgeable accessible isn't always easy. SourceGraph is a code intelligence platform, and it gives developers what they need to drive their own learning over time and in different situations. Teams without SourceGraph need to rely on asking colleagues or reviewing out of date documentation, which is cumbersome and time consuming. But with SourceGraph, every developer can search across millions of repositories to find specific code, saving time for themselves and everyone else. So when questions do come up, you know it's about the big stuff. SourceGraph was created to make developers' lives easier, and today they work with leading companies across every industry, including 3 out of the 5 top tech companies, plus PayPal, Uber, Plaid, GE, Reddit, Atlassian, and more. Visit about.sourcegraph.com to learn more. That's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world are using SourceGraph and to see what SourceGraph can do for you. You can also visit the link in the show notes to let them know you heard about them from us. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of Mac Power users.
Well, that's not all the feedback we got this month. John wrote in about iWork tabs, and I thought his comments were really helpful. I wanted to share them with listeners. And he was talking about one of his favorite features. We'd covered iWork off and on, the Pages, Numbers, Keynote apps. And he says, something that doesn't get a mention is the ability to add tabs. And this is a Mac OS thing that they incorporated into it. Like the easiest example would be Pages, where you can have multiple documents open, but they show up as tabs in the app, so you can just click through them. And John has 5 to 10 apps open a day. He's a teacher, so he breaks the tabs by his classes and grade levels and whatever he's doing with his kids, and then he can just jump between them out of one window. Whereas with Microsoft Word, every document would be a separate document, and then you get all this pollution on your desktop. And just kind of the clean use of tabs kind of got me thinking, do you do that much, Stephen? Do you use these tabs when they built it into an app?
I use them in Finder a lot, but I don't really use them in other applications. Like I don't use them in Pages or other text editors. Really, I think because I don't, if I find myself moving between documents, I kind of want to see them both, right? So I'll have like one on the right and one on the left. I think it's cool, but it doesn't really fit kind of the way that I work most of the time.
Yeah. One way I use this is with OmniFocus. I have a script that opens OmniFocus, but then sets up tabs with my major perspectives where I don't need to see them against each other. But during the day, I may want to jump between, the inbox and the action list or the MacSparky active project list. And I actually find the tab interface to be really good for that. So there are apps where it does make sense. But in order to have it, you've got to have really a Mac native app, because this is part of the Mac OS kind of thing that I can't remember. It was about 2-3 years ago this got added, where they made it easy for native apps to add tabs, and the developer has to support it. And, that's just not true with a lot of apps. But iWork, OmniFocus, Safari, Finder, there are apps out there that do it. We also heard from Andrew. And he had said a few episodes ago, we did an interview which we discussed having different email clients for different uses. I think it was Mike Hurley. Was it Mike Hurley did that? Well, I guess
he does do that. Yeah.
I don't know who it was, but Mike hasn't been on the show for a long time. I don't know who Andrew's talking about, but it does come up once in a while. And Andrew has work accounts and personal accounts, and this is a baller move. His work is on Outlook. And when he goes on vacation, he deletes Outlook. He just deletes the app.
That's pretty awesome.
Like, I love that. Andrew, you're my hero. But then he does personal stuff in Apple Mail. So it's very, it's a good strategy, honestly, to keep them separate. Contextual computing, ding, 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 right?
Yep.
When you go into your inbox, if you see work email and personal email at the same time, suddenly it's very easy to get distracted or get aggravated about something at work that you shouldn't have even known about. I think the unified inbox is a terrible idea. So that's one way to attack this. But having separate apps also works. Do you do that?
I don't. Everything is in Mail. I used
Yeah.
to, my last sort of jobby job, we ran on Google Apps and I would use Gmail for work stuff, and then I would just ignore it
Yeah.
on the weekends when I was on vacation, or like move it off my home screen if I was on vacation. It's all in mail for now. One thing I want to experiment with though, and I just haven't yet, is in focus modes in the new releases. One thing it can do, or one thing Apple talked about, even if it's in the beta yet, is you can turn off certain email accounts and certain focus modes. And I would like a weekend focus mode that basically all it does is it turns off, notifications from a couple apps and then hides my work email.
Yeah. You could also hide your work calendar in that if you wanted. And
Yeah.
when the third-party apps start showing up with support for this, I think this is a feature that we haven't discussed much and hasn't got much press because it really does require third-party support, I think, to be fully implemented. But I think it's a great idea that you could turn a focus mode on and hide your work email or hide your personal email or have calendar show up. I love this stuff. Apple is like they're playing my game right now, and I want to see them do as much as they can with it. That said, the last few weeks I have been using MailMate again on my Mac. And people who are in the Mac Sparky Labs know all about it because I've sent out a bunch of videos and stuff on it. And man, MailMate is awesome.
Yeah, I want to dig into this. It's in some future episode
Yeah.
because I've played with it in the past, but not recently. And so I definitely want to hear how your experience has been.
Yeah. The trick is setting a custom key binding file. And this is like super nerdy stuff. But if you're willing to go down that rabbit hole, it's really hard to beat the speed of MailMate. It's not as pretty as Apple Mail, but it is powerful. What are we playing with these days, Stephen? Anything new or fun?
I mean, I think we've covered my stuff. I mean, a lot of reminders, and then basically I'm deep in calendar land. So I've got some stuff
Yeah.
that I want to get into. There are a couple ways to add. Speaking of HomeKit, my mini split in my studio is by a company called Mr. Cool, which is like what a name. And there are a couple ways to get that onto HomeKit, and that's kind of on my list. But I've kind of been heads down on the calendar.
This whole discussion of HomeKit has me very excited about what could I really do in the studio space. Like, how far can I push this? And I'm ready to abuse it. But that'll be another day. I'll tell you something that I'm playing with, and I'm increasingly falling in love with, is this app Hook. We had Luke on the show, I don't know, about a year ago. The Hook app is an app that creates a link to basically anything on your Mac, and it allows you to connect them in the application. So if you open an OmniFocus task, it'll show you the email that's connected to it, or the Obsidian, or the craft document. And it's just a very easy way to link things together. And as I continue to beat the drum for contextual computing, those direct links are the way that you get your work done faster. I wasn't using it as much because I have so much stuff in DevonThink and I can link anything in DevonThink, but I have some data outside of DevonThink in the Finder, and Hook lets me do that. And just the way it automatically connects everything together, it brings it to a new level. And they just celebrated their 3rd year. As a full disclosure, I'm on their board of advisors. I don't get any money or anything for that, but I'm so into contextual computing. I want to help anybody that's trying to push this forward. They've been around 3 years. I have faith that they're going to be around. The people behind it, Luke in particular, is super motivated to make this happen. And if you spend the time to learn the kind of the Hook system, it does give you a way to jump around your Mac and get to other things very quickly. I'm going to make some content for this for the Mac Sparky Labs and eventually something publicly. But I'm kind of figuring out my workflows right now. But I'm very interested in this app lately.
Yeah, we had him on the show like 100 episodes ago or something. So it is
Yeah.
cool to see their 3rd anniversary, and that's something else I'm looking forward to your exploration of, because it hasn't really stuck for me yet, and so
Yeah.
I want to find maybe some more ways to explore it.
As silly as it sounds, they changed the keyboard shortcut to Control H, which is a very easy shortcut to remember. And I think that almost makes it even easier to apply hook links. But yeah, I will cover this. We'll talk about it. The idea of this is a good one. This is one I kind of wish Apple would build into the operating system, because I don't like having it done by a third party. But it's a third party that I trust, and I think it's going to be around for a while. But this really should be a system feature, although I don't think Apple would iterate it as fast as Luke has.
Yeah, that's probably true.
All right, so that wraps it up for today's feedback show. If you have feedback, we have forums at talk.macpowerusers.com. Each episode has its own thread, so you can put stuff in there. We're always grabbing things from there for the feedback. There's also a feedback forum on the website, so let us know what you're thinking. We'll get it in the outline for the next show. And thank you to our sponsors today. That's TextExpander, Memberful, Indeed, and SourceGraph. And we'll see you next time.